I know, I still haven't done the final yet. I'm trying, I'm just pushing myself so much. It's the last episode, it has to be perfect. And there's just so much to say. I keep going back and adding more and adjusting things, and I'm gonna do it, I promise. But this is easier, so I'm doing this first. As soon as the episode starts, to get Koronowski showing off an AI like an object on QVC. And I immediately thought, yeah, I don't trust you. I really expected him to be untrustworthy, for him to have a dark secret or something. I'm so surprised we never got that. I mean, we so did, but the narrative doesn't seem to think so. We'll get into that in another video. But it just felt so fake and so corporate, I felt so uneasy. Then we learned this Koronowski guy is dead, and I expected a story there. I was ready to find out what dark and twisted thing happened. Either he was murdered, or he's not really dead, but clearly right from the start my attention was in the wrong place. That didn't really bode well for the rest of the series, did it? Oh my god, I also remember painstakingly waiting for the intro. Do you remember? How long did it take us to get to the 01010101? It was episode 3 or something, wasn't it? All we get is the find a new life bit, while he's in the dark, all neon, with the red eyes that me and a friend joked meant he was clearly evil. We did not trust this 01 person before the series even started. He looks so scary, all lit up in the dark. So Adato rushes to this theme park place and he says, "Morning, Yuri-san," and I remember thinking, oh good, thank god, we're nice to AIs in this series. Like, oh, he's so respectful to humour gear. That completely quells my fears of treating AI like jokes or lesser beings in this series. Rushing down the steps going, "Morning, Yuri-san," was to me a nicer statement that the main character respects humour gear and treats them equally. But 2 minutes in and I was optimistic. He shows up on a stage in a sparkly suit covered in sequins and a comically large bow, being very loud and over the top. And I really like loud, bright, expressive, exaggerated things, so yeah, it's fair to say I was very optimistic about this series. See, I can be positive. So he gets fired because he's not funny, and the Humour Gears act happens to be enjoyable. And then I got worried that we'd be having a stealing our jobs kind of racism in this series, and that worry got stuck in the back of my mind. We're introduced to Taro, and Adato says, as if an AI could understand comedy. 3 minutes in, and I was no longer optimistic. That's such a horrible thing to say. That felt so not elitist. What's the word I'm looking for? I didn't appreciate him looking down on a humour gear like that. But it's not like this one sentence solidified the character for me. I just thought, okay, Adato is overly nice, but he still has a bit of prejudice against humour gear. That's probably going to be part of his character arc. First time I saw Metsubo Junai, I was pretty much instantly invested. But I remember, if you can believe it now, I remember feeling intimidated by them. Can you believe there's ever a time we thought Metsubo Junai were actual villains? Part of the reason I was invested is that I was just waiting for the episode where it had been revealed that they were secretly humour gear all along, and part of it is the cute little keychain on Jin's gun and the fact that Hori's katana is lying on a samurai themed fabric, and I thought that was absolutely adorable. And of course, and I am of course going to overanalyse this scene here. Jin comes in and immediately starts playing with one of the bullets, I think. I don't think he's used it before. Has it just been placed there recently and it's like, ooh, shiny new thing? As I said before, Hori's katana is lying on a samurai-themed sort of faded purple fabric, draped over the wheelchair. All this time I thought it was another table, but it's not, it's the wheelchair. This isn't that enlightening, but I love how he specifically has samurai fabric. A few episodes later, I swear to god he's watching that samurai drama with them. I just love the idea that he's always had an interest in samurai, and even when he's hacked by the arc, that kind of seeps through. Jin's fabric is a deep red with Jin's fabric is a deep red with traditional looking dragons on it. And while Horobi has the faded purple and the samurai aesthetic, red and dragons doesn't seem to fit Jin all that much. Jin's theme is a pink falcon. Red and dragons have nothing to do with it. But when he dies and comes back, he's now red and has the whole flame thing going on. Dragons, fire, red. Is that a complete coincidence? Am I reaching? Or was that just excellent foreshadowing? Horobi talks about how now Koronowski is dead, they can finally start their Project Magia. I'm not entirely sure why Koronowski needed to be dead for this to happen. I can't remember if that was ever explained, or if it was just obvious and I'm completely missing it. I mean, between you and me, I noticed when Horobi's eyes flashed blue in a single glitchy scene. I legitimately never noticed the giant satellite arc they kept blatantly showing us at first. So maybe I'm just being stupid here. But that also just played into my expectations that there was something suspicious about Koronowski's death. If he needed to be dead, were they genuinely just waiting around until then? Because he didn't seem that old when he died. It's not like he died of old age. Jin asks what that is and how they're going to do it. And I understand from a storytelling point of view that that's just a way to get Horobi to explain to us, the audience, what this plan entails. But it strikes me as odd that Jin just doesn't seem to know stuff. He doesn't know what this plan is. He didn't know he was Horobi's son. Why on earth doesn't he know stuff? What have they been doing all this time? So anyway, Horobi explains the plan. They're utilising Humagear Singularity, which again, somehow Jin has come all this way without knowing the meaning of, which Horobi then explains as being when an AI gains self-awareness and surpasses humanity. Then Horobi says it's time for humanity to perish, just like this town all those years ago, and we get a really cool aerial shot of Daybreak Town, and then we go into the water and get our first shot of the Ark. We don't know the Ark yet, but in hindsight, I can't help but feel like this was also not foreshadowing, but hinting. Now it's time for humanity to perish just like this town, and we are immediately shown the Ark. Again, maybe I'm just looking way too into things and getting way too annoyed about people who are just incapable of understanding that Horobi was hacked by the Ark. It just feels like even the first ever Metsubo Jinnai scene is screaming at us that, like, look, the Ark, extinction, destruction, the Ark. Look what's at the centre of this destroyed town, the Ark. Like, seriously, the Ark is at the centre of this destroyed town, and the destroyed town was compared to the destruction of humanity. I know that I'm probably reaching, but at the same time the imagery is just glaring. Anyway, while I'm reaching, at this point in time, Horobi knows that Jin is a Humagear he created, even though Jin doesn't. Jin gained Singularity, but it's not the Singularity the Ark wants, so he's reset. At the end of the series, Jin still remembers this, but during the last 2 episodes before the hiatus, Horobi doesn't seem to. It's like, it's there, but it's not as present in his mind as it used to be. And then, as he starts to gain Singularity himself, and eventually breaks free from the Ark because he can't kill his son, and this is now the most important thing to him. I know I'm confusing myself here, and I'm starting to lose my own point actually, but I'm just wondering how many times Horobi and Jin have, like, come close to Singularity in the meantime, and reset by the Ark because they're starting to drift. And that's why Jin doesn't know this stuff that he really probably should. There's just no way they got to this point without Jin knowing. There's no way he was never curious enough to ask Horobi what he was up to. And Horobi always answers Jin's questions, that's why it was such a big deal towards the end when he was on the verge of a breakdown and he didn't. Anyway, I'm getting ahead of myself and way too confusing, and I need to take an inhaler. Alright, that's better, I think. They talked about Singularity, and then were introduced to Izu, who, given her mannerisms and her straightforward way of speaking, I felt, well, she probably hasn't gained Singularity already then. That's something we'll have to look forward to. And again, I really liked how Adito was talking to her as if she was a human. He wasn't like, a Humagear, like I have now come to expect. He was just speaking to her, which, again, I thought meant that he was really respectful to Humagear, and he'd be a good advocate for them if anything was to happen in the future, which I was expecting. I know how AI stories work. I also really loved watching the creation of the 01 driver. I don't really have anything to say about it, I just really like seeing it all come together. I liked that it was the humour gear being hacked. They were very clearly being hacked. It wasn't them turning evil by themselves. They are clearly the victims here. It was so obvious, absolutely no one could deny that. And obviously, if a humour gear is hacked, they aren't in control of what they're doing. I thought it was great that they were getting that aspect out of the way early, so everyone would understand what hacking meant. And I just thought back on myself and think, oh, you sweet summer child. Something I want to talk about is when Taro is hacked, he's looking at the audience and they're all clearly uneasy at first, but then his vision glitches to them laughing and clapping, and then back to them looking scared. It's not a memory, it's the same audience in the same places. The hacking is manipulating how he's seeing things. Why was that never addressed again? How interesting would that have been to delve into? Ames arrived to deal with things. I had very uncomfortable feelings about Ames back then. I don't like any organisation with guns that immediately villainise any one group of people and shoot first and ask questions later. But I assumed there'd be character development on that part, and the two main Ames people would eventually come to realise how disturbing that whole aspect is and how wrong they were. Which I feel was not actually properly addressed, but at the same time they did have their character development, and even though I wish they'd have actively said something about just how wrong Ames was and how awful it was to show up and immediately start shooting and apologise for actively calling humour gear tools. No one ever seems to apologise in this series. The development is still there and I'm fine with it. Yua's stance may have been up in the air for way too long, but still, I'm getting ahead of myself. It's like that Mitchell and Webb skit, I think it's Mitchell and Webb, about noticing their logo as a skull and going, are we the bad guys? Yua is there to collect data, Fua immediately starts shooting and saying to destroy every last one of them, and that's why I dislike Ames. Fua never should have been allowed this job. If he, at this point in time, was so trigger happy against basically any humour gear, he should never have been allowed a job that involves shooting them. It never should have happened. He should not be there. He should be in therapy. But we all know therapy just doesn't exist in Kamen Rider. Yua doesn't care about human lives, just wants to collect data. Which I'll be honest, I hate that stance, but I love that she has it. Her personality is not the girl one. She's not nice and wanting to keep the peace because she's the girl one. She's rough, she has negative traits, she's especially just not nice about humour gear. I love that she has that. She's not the passive, gentle, kind female one. It's nice, she's, a character in her own right. The next scene felt so much like in Gaim, where you learn that the first... Oh no, I'm blanking. They weren't called Invis, were they? Were they? The Woodlouse things were the Invis. Oh no, that's embarrassing. The first guy Kota fought and killed was in fact Yuya. You knew that Yuya was gone, but it's still him. And it's this huge, sickening scene when you find out. It felt like that, except our hero already knew the Magia he's fighting was once a perfectly innocent humour gear, and he's just not reacting like that. I would have expected a reaction similar to Kota's when he realises he has to fight him, but there's just not. And I get it, Kota and Yuya were friends, Aruto has just met Taro, but surely any decent human being who genuinely did treat humans and humour gear equally would have been a little bit reluctant. You wouldn't expect him to yell at him and then ask Izu for the driver. It's so impersonal and removed from the situation. And again, I might have understood if he was having a delayed reaction, but there was just no reaction. I can't describe it, but the way Aruto looks, He looks like he's about to fight the most evil person imaginable, not a hacking victim. I'd have liked Aruto a lot more if he was actually sympathetic while fighting. Also, I really like grasshoppers. The scene of a giant grasshopper just makes me hungry. Grasshoppers cost so much money for so little, and then you have to cook them yourself. At least the crickets come pre-roasted. Not important. I wish Aruto was more sympathetic. I wish he was more reluctant to fight. I wish it was more difficult a decision for him to fight, but unfortunately that's not the series we got. I will admit, finding the voice generator that did the jump to the sky turns to a rider kick was such a laugh. I think we all had a lot of fun with that. The fight was also very much like the debut of Gates Revive for me. It was so cool. It had the awesome background music. It was like I should be hyped, but he was fighting my favourite character, so I'm obviously not rooting for him. This debut fight was so cool, but I felt so uneasy the entire time because he's not fighting your average faceless monster of the week. He's not fighting an actual villain. He's fighting an innocent Humagear who's been hacked, and we're supposed to be happy that he succeeded. I mean, there were some genuinely funny moments. When he jumped too far and ended up on top of the roller coaster, I'm sorry, but that did make me laugh. It looked amazing, it sounded amazing. I love that he went through a manual first in the Zia subspace thing, so it was plausible that he suddenly knew what to do with this brand new piece of technology. One of my favourite things is when the background music suddenly comes to a halt when something interrupts the flow and then picks back up again. The suitcase turning into a blade was really cool. It was a really cool fight. I can't say that enough. I just hate how uneasy I was throughout, especially during the quips like gotcha. These are innocent victims. I get that you have to fight them, but you don't have to say things like that. As much as Ains disturbs me, I don't get as annoyed when Fua or Yua just attack Humagear with no emotion, or with rage depending on who you are, because they so very clearly don't consider Humagear as real people. Yua sees them as tools and Fua just wants to shoot them all. Then we get Jin cheering and clapping, and oh my goodness, does the Magier say that? The Magier attacks Jin, Jin subdues the Magier without even looking, shoots them in the head while giggling. Love that scene. And it's a glitched voice, so I assume it's the Magier saying, "We have reports of a lost child." A lost child? Jin? Oh my god, the amount of foreshadowing in this episode. I worry that the more CGI becomes readily available, the less practical effects we'll get, not in Toku, just in general. I grew up on practical effects, I adored it. One of my favourite childhood films was Labyrinth. Every single time I watched it, I had to watch the making afterwards. It just astounded me watching all these hands and how amazing the Firegan looked and all these suits and puppets. I don't look down on CGI, I just get sad that we don't really do practical effects like that anymore. And I think the biggest thing for me was learning that Shin Godzilla was CGI, because if they make Godzilla CGI, if they stop putting a man in a suit for Godzilla, then nothing is sacred. Nothing is safe. So that's another reason why I loved the look of this fight. If I can separate the story from the fight for a minute, the CGI complemented the practical effects so nicely in my opinion, and it restored my confidence in that regard. I know now that they're not going to start replacing practical effects with CGI, they're not replacing anything, they're just enhancing it, so I like that a lot. Then we get Aruto's catchphrase, "There's only one guy who can stop you, and that's me," and I'll be honest, whenever you get a character saying, "I'm the only one who can do this," I can't explain why, but I hate that so much. I guess it's too close to the chosen one trope, I don't know, but it especially makes me uneasy when he's saying it to a hacking victim. So he rider kicks through poor Taro and his blood and broken body parts fly past Aruto in slow motion. You know, Taro the hacking victim. That's something we were subjected to, strings of his blood. You can be very graphic when you're fighting someone made of metal with blood that isn't red. Aruto flies down with his terrifying glowing evil red eyes. Fua steps on a Magier and says his history repeating itself, which, ooh, what could he possibly be talking about? And Okudai's an amazing actor, because he genuinely goes from looking angry to looking legitimately scared. And it was such a subtle shift, but it's there. Jin gives Hawabe the broken, what does that say? Barothamagia key. He gives Hawabe the Barothamagia key and tells him about 01. Jin's like, I guess the former president didn't die without a backup plan, and Hawabe says it doesn't matter, so it can't be that was stopping them from acting in the first place. Hawabe creepily says that humanity is about to become an endangered species, and we're once again shown the Ark glowing red now, you know, because Hawabe is hacked by the Ark. Oh, I missed that. Adato, instead of feeling any sort of remorse for having killed Humagir, is instead excitingly telling Izu all about it. It was like whoosh, and then boom, it was so cool. So I'm glad that our hero is a nice, sweet, caring, compassionate person who treats humans and Humagir equally. I'm happy I finally did this. I've been struggling with the final for so long, but I then told myself, well, I can't do other videos if I haven't done that yet. But now I'm just thinking, sod it, I'll do whatever video is easiest to do at the time, and if that means getting to the final halfway through my retrospectives, then that's fine. I'm past pressuring myself now.